Austin, Texas, June 8, 2008. 4 in the morning. The air hangs thick and still over the sleeping capital. A shadowy figure moves through the darkness toward an iconic white mansion, its 6 towering columns standing sentinel against the night sky. In their hand, a bottle filled with gasoline, a flicker of flame. Glass shatters against 152 years of history. Within minutes, the Texas governor's mansion, home to every state leader since before the Civil War, erupts in flames. Surveillance cameras capture everything. The perpetrator vanishes into the oak trees. To this day, no one has been charged. But the fire revealed something investigators never expected. This wasn't the first time violence had visited these grounds. The mansion, it seems, has been collecting ghosts since the day it was built. This is the story of a house where power and death have danced together for over a century and a half, where forbidden love ended in murder, where a heartbroken young man's blood soaked through the floorboards, where a legendary governor refuses to leave even in death, and where, on a summer night in 2008, someone tried to burn it all down. Welcome to America's most haunted seat of political power. Austin, Texas sits in the heart of the Lone Star State, a city that barely existed when plans for this mansion were first drawn. The year was 1854. Texas had been a state for less than a decade, still rough around the edges, still finding its identity. The first 4 governors had lived in boarding houses and rented rooms, shuffling between temporary quarters like vagabonds. It was an embarrassment for a state that prided itself on grandeur. In February 1854, the Texas legislature voted to change that. They authorized the construction of a permanent residence, a statement in brick and mortar that Texas was here to stay. The contract was awarded to Abner Hugh Cook, a master builder who had taught himself architecture by studying books and observing the great homes of the South. Cook was known throughout Texas for his Greek Revival designs, buildings that spoke of democracy and permanence. The site chosen sat on a gentle rise southwest of the Capitol grounds, commanding views of the growing city, 105 feet long, 56 feet wide. Cook fashioned the bricks himself from clay he dug from his own pit along the Colorado River. Pine logs were hauled in from Bastrop. Every nail, every board, every window frame was selected with care. The design was deliberate. 6 ionic columns, each 29 feet tall, rose from the ground to the roof, creating a veranda that wrapped around the front of the house. In the brutal Texas summers, this wasn't just beauty, it was survival. The columns created shade. The wide hallways and enormous windows were positioned to catch every breeze. The house was built to breathe. Cook added his signature touch, ornate X and stick railings that decorated the veranda like lace. The windows were tall, designed to flood the interior with light. The rooms were spacious, built for entertaining, for hosting, for the business of governing a young and ambitious state. Construction should have taken 6 months. It took a year. Cook fell behind schedule, and as compensation, he had to pay the rent for the waiting governor's boarding house out of his own pocket. But when the mansion was finally completed in June 1856, even Cook's critics had to admit, it was magnificent. The first family to cross the threshold was Governor Elisha Marshall Pease, Texas's 5th governor, along with his wife Lucadia and their daughters. They moved into a house that was sparsely furnished, its rooms echoing with emptiness but filled with potential. This was their home now, and the home of every Texas governor who would follow. The mansion stands there still, at 1010 Colorado Street in downtown Austin. In 1970, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In 1974, it was designated a National Historic Landmark. It is the 4th oldest continuously occupied governor's residence in the United States. 171 years of history contained within those walls. But from the very beginning, something else lived there too. Stories, whispers, legends that predated even the bricks themselves. The oldest ghost story attached to the Texas governor's mansion doesn't begin with the house at all. It begins with the land, before construction ever started, when this hill was just open ground on the edge of a frontier town. The tale first appeared in print in 1898, passed down through oral tradition, impossible to verify but impossible to forget. It speaks of a time when Texas was still contested territory, when Comanche nations moved freely through these lands, and when young men called Texas Scouts patrolled the boundaries between cultures. A young scout, his name lost to history, encountered a Comanche girl, perhaps at a trading post, perhaps near the river river. The accounts don't say, but they fell in love, a love that crossed every boundary their worlds had erected. Her father, a man protective of his daughter and suspicious of Anglo intentions, forbade the relationship. He feared, perhaps rightly, that the scout would take his daughter away from her people forever. So the young couple met in secret. On the grounds where the mansion would one day stand, they would slip away from watchful eyes. Hidden by darkness, by trees, by the topography of the hill, they stole moments together. One night, her father followed. He discovered them together, and according to legend, his rage was instantaneous and complete. He attacked the young scout. Whether with a knife, a tomahawk, or bare hands, the stories differ. But the result was the same. The scout died there, on that ground, his blood seeping into Texas soil. The Comanche girl watched the man she loved murdered before her eyes. She knew what awaited her if she returned to her tribe, a forced marriage perhaps, or exile, or shame. She knew she could never marry another, and so, in an act of devastating finality, she took her own life. Some versions say she used her father's weapon, others say she carried a blade of her own. She died above her lover's body, their blood mingling in the earth. This is legend, this is folklore, but for over a century, people have reported seeing them. Two figures, hand in hand, walking the mansion grounds at dusk. A young man and a young woman, dressed in clothing that belongs to no modern era, moving together through the gardens. When approached, they vanish. When called to, they don't turn. They simply walk, eternally, reunited in death in the way they could never be in life. Staff members have reported it. Visitors have reported it. Governors and their families have mentioned it quietly, reluctant to be labeled as believers in ghost stories, but unable to shake what they've seen. The figures appear most often in the late evening, when the light is failing and shadows grow long, hand in hand, always together. Two souls who have been waiting on that hill since before the mansion ever rose from the ground. This is the mansion's oldest haunting, but it would not be the last. The Civil War came to Texas like a storm. In 1861, the state seceded from the Union and joined the Confederacy. Sam Houston, serving as governor at the time, refused to swear allegiance to the Confederate States. He was removed from office, his political career ending in disgrace and principle. Texas spent the next 4 years in turmoil. Young men marched off to battles fought 1,000 miles away. The state's economy buckled, and in 1863, a man named Pendleton Murrah was elected governor. He was Texas' third and final Confederate governor, a lawyer from Marshall who found himself leading a state that was fracturing under the weight of war. Murrah moved into the governor's mansion with his wife. The house, less than a decade old, already bore the marks of hard use. Furnishings were sparse, luxuries were non-existent. The Confederacy was collapsing, and the mansion became a kind of refuge for family members seeking safety in the capital. During Murrah's term, his 19-year-old nephew came to visit. The nephew's name has been lost to time, or perhaps deliberately obscured by a family wishing to protect his memory. At the same time, Mrs. Murrah's niece was also staying at the mansion. She was young, likely in her late teens, and visiting from elsewhere in Texas. The nephew saw her and fell instantly, devastatingly in love. Whether she encouraged this affection or merely tolerated it politely, the accounts don't say. But she did not return his feelings. She enjoyed his attention, perhaps, the way young women sometimes do, but her heart remained her own. According to the legend, the nephew proposed marriage the very next day. One day, a boy so consumed by feeling that he couldn't conceive of any answer but yes. She refused. Gently or firmly, we don't know. But the answer was no. What happened next depends on which version of the story you hear. Most accounts agree on this. Later that night, a gunshot rang out from the upstairs of the mansion. A staff member, hesitant and frightened, climbed the stairs and approached the small guest bedroom on the north side of the house. They found the nephew on the bed, dead. The room was soaked with blood, walls, floor, bedding. The exact method of his death has been debated. Some say gunshot. Some say he used a blade. The truth was likely too horrific for the family to speak of publicly. What is certain is that the governor's nephew took his own life in that room, his grief too enormous to carry another day. The staff refused to clean the room. They claimed they heard sounds, moaning, weeping, even after the body had been removed. Doors wouldn't stay closed. Cold spots appeared in the hallway outside. Guests who slept in nearby rooms reported terrible dreams. Some heard footsteps pacing back and forth, as though someone was walking off unbearable anguish. Governor Andrew J. Hamilton, who succeeded Murrah in 1865, ordered the room sealed. The door was locked and, according to some accounts, partially boarded over. For decades, that room remained closed, a tomb within the mansion. But even sealed, the north wing of the house carried a reputation. Staff avoided it. Guests requested rooms elsewhere. There was a feeling there, people said, a weight, a presence. In the 20th century, during renovations, the room was finally unsealed and restored. But the stories didn't stop. Staff continued to report sounds from that bedroom. Weeping, footsteps, the rattle of doorknobs turning though no one was there. The activity is said to be strongest on Sundays. The young man died on a Sunday. Psychics and sensitives who have visited the mansion describe feeling an overwhelming sadness in that part of the house. A young man trapped in the worst moment of his life, unable to move forward, unable to understand why the pain hasn't ended. The nephew's ghost, they say, doesn't haunt out of malice. He haunts because he doesn't know how to leave. Governor Murrah himself didn't stay in Texas long. When the Confederacy collapsed in 1865, he fled to Mexico rather than face Union occupation. He died there shortly after in exile, far from home. Some say his ghost returned to the mansion as well. Witnesses claim to have seen a figure matching Murrah's description, a thin, solemn man in dark clothing, walking the grounds and halls. Unlike his nephew, Murrah's spirit is not confined to one room. He wanders, both inside and outside the mansion, as though searching for something he left behind. Perhaps his nephew, perhaps his lost cause, perhaps merely peace. The mansion's most famous ghost is also its most famous resident. Sam Houston, the man who fought at San Jacinto, who served as president of the Republic of Texas, who governed the state twice, moved into the governor's mansion in 1859. He was the third occupant, and the house was still sparsely furnished, still finding its identity. Houston brought with him an enormous four-post mahogany bed, a piece of furniture so grand it seemed fit for a king. That bed was placed in the southeast bedroom, and it remains there to this day, a relic of one of Texas's most legendary figures. His eighth child, Temple Lee Houston, was born in the mansion. He was the first baby to draw breath within those walls, the first cry to echo through the halls. Houston's time as governor was turbulent. When Texas voted to secede in 1861, Houston refused to take an oath of loyalty to the Confederacy. His principles cost him everything. He was removed from office, humiliated, cast aside by the state he had helped create. He lived only 2 more years, dying in 1863, his legacy complicated and unfinished. But according to dozens of witnesses over the decades, Sam Houston never truly left the mansion. His spirit is said to linger in the bedroom where he slept, the room with the great mahogany bed. Staff members have reported seeing a tall figure standing near the bed, dressed in clothing from the mid-19th century, solid and real until the moment you speak, and then he's gone. The most documented encounter occurred in the 1980s, during the administration of Governor Mark White. White and his wife Linda had moved into the mansion, joining a long line of families who had made the historic house their home. Linda quickly noticed something peculiar. In the hallway outside their bedroom hung a portrait of Sam Houston, one of many historical paintings that adorned the mansion's walls. Above the portrait was a small light, designed to illuminate the artwork. Linda would turn off the light each night before bed. It seemed wasteful to leave it burning, but each morning, without fail, the light was on again. She assumed her husband was turning it on. He assumed she wanted it on. But after several days, they compared notes. Neither of them was touching the light. They asked the staff. No one was entering the hallway at night. No one had access to that part of the house after the family retired. Yet every morning, the light above Sam Houston's portrait burned brightly. Linda began turning it off deliberately, testing the phenomenon. Each time, by morning, it was on again. The pattern continued for the entire duration of the White family's residence. They never discovered a rational explanation. The wiring was checked. No shorts, no malfunctions. The light switch worked perfectly. There was no timer, no automatic system. And yet, every single night, someone or something turned that light back on. Does Sam Houston's ghost prefer to keep his portrait illuminated? Does his spirit, proud even in death, refuse to be left in darkness? Or is it something else, a residual energy, a habit so deeply ingrained in life that it continues after death? The southeast bedroom where Houston slept has been the site of other strange occurrences. Guests staying in the room have reported the sensation of being watched. Some have woken in the night to see a figure standing at the foot of the bed, tall and imposing, before it fades into nothing. Others have felt the mattress depress, as though someone has sat down beside them, though the room is empty. Houston paced the mansion's second-floor balcony during his final days as governor, contemplating the decision that would end his political career. He chose principle over power, integrity over pragmatism. Perhaps his spirit remains because that choice, though righteous, was also a wound that never healed. Perhaps he stays to watch over the house he loved, the state he helped build, even as it moves forward without him. There is one more ghost that walks the grounds, though her story is the most painful of all. She is not a governor. She is not a family member of note. She was, according to legend, a member of the mansion's staff, a maid, young and poor, with no family wealth to protect her. She became pregnant. The father of the child is lost to history, though whispers suggest it may have been someone of standing, someone connected to the mansion itself, perhaps a visitor, perhaps someone more permanent. Regardless, when her condition became visible, she was dismissed. No discussion, no compassion, no acknowledgement of the child she carried or the circumstances that led to her situation. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, an unmarried pregnant woman had almost no options. Shelters were scarce. Employment was impossible. Family might turn away in shame. She faced poverty, destitution, perhaps death in childbirth without medical care. The mansion that had been her livelihood, her security, her home, closed its doors to her forever. Visitors and staff have reported seeing a young woman near the mansion's entrance, always outside, never within. She appears to be weeping. Her hands are often described as reaching out, as though pleading. Some witnesses say she seems to be asking for something, permission to enter, perhaps, or recognition, or simply acknowledgement that she existed, that her suffering mattered. She is seen most often in the early morning or at dusk, times when the light softens and the boundary between worlds seems thinner. She never speaks. She never approaches closely. She simply stands there, waiting for justice that will never come, waiting for someone to open the door. Her story is a reminder that the mansion, for all its grandeur, was also a workplace. Dozens of people labored there over the decades. Cooks, cleaners, gardeners, drivers, whose names were never recorded, whose struggles were never acknowledged. She represents all of them, the invisible hands that kept the house running, while governors made history in its public rooms. The ghost of the pregnant maid is the mansion's conscience, a reminder that power always has a cost, and those costs are rarely paid by the powerful. By the 1890s, the mansion had become a fixture of Texas political life, a symbol of continuity even as governors came and went. In 1891, a man named James Stephen Hogg was elected governor. Hogg was the first native-born Texan to hold the office, a populist reformer who championed public education and railroad regulation. He was also, by all accounts, a devoted family man. When Hogg moved into the mansion, he didn't come alone. He brought his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and an absolute menagerie of animals. Dogs and cats, certainly. Every family had those, but Hogg brought exotic birds, squirrels, raccoons, and any creature his children took a liking to. At any given moment, the mansion was alive with the sounds of animals and children. The Hogg children were energetic, mischievous, and utterly fearless. They treated the grand mansion like a playground. The sweeping central staircase, with its polished wooden banister, was an irresistible temptation. The children would climb to the top and slide down at reckless speed, whooping and laughing, much to the horror of the staff. Governor Hogg, practical man that he was, solved the problem by hammering nails partway into the banister. The protruding nails made sliding impossible. Those nail holes are still visible today, a small humanizing detail in a house filled with grandeur. They're a reminder that this wasn't just a political symbol. It was a home where children played and parents tried, often unsuccessfully, to maintain order. Hogg's daughter, Ima, would grow up to become one of Texas's most beloved philanthropists. Her name, Ima Hogg, has been the subject of endless jokes and urban legends, including the false claim that she had a sister named Ura. She did not. But Ima herself became a guardian of Texas history, dedicating her life to historic preservation and the arts. She never forgot the mansion where she spent her childhood, racing through its halls, surrounded by animals and laughter. The Hogg years brought a warmth to the mansion that stands in stark contrast to the tragedies that preceded them. For a few years, The house was filled with life in the most joyful sense. Perhaps that energy lingers too. Some staff members have reported hearing children's laughter in the halls late at night when no children are present. Others have described the sensation of something brushing past them quickly, like a child running by. The sounds of animals, scratching, chirping, the patter of small feet, have been heard in rooms that have been empty for decades. If the mansion is haunted by sorrow, it is also haunted by joy. The Hogg family left their mark not in blood or tears, but in laughter and nail holes. Over the decades, the mansion weathered wars, economic depressions, social upheavals. It hosted presidents and celebrities, political dinners, and state funerals. By 1914, the structure needed significant restoration. An addition was constructed, expanding the kitchen and adding more living quarters upstairs. In 1979, another major renovation was undertaken, refurbishing the interiors and stabilizing the aging structure. Through it all, the mansion remained occupied. Every Texas governor since 1856 has lived there, an unbroken chain of residency that few official homes in America can claim. The house absorbed their lives, their triumphs, their scandals, their private griefs. It watched as Texas transformed from a rural frontier state to an economic and cultural powerhouse. But on June 8, 2008, the mansion faced its greatest threat. Not from time, not from neglect, but from fire. It is 4 a.m. on June 8, 2008. Downtown Austin is silent. The Texas governor's mansion sits dark and empty, wrapped in scaffolding and construction fencing. It is undergoing a major renovation. The interiors have been stripped, the historic furnishings removed and placed in climate-controlled storage. Every painting, every piece of furniture, every artifact of 152 years has been carefully cataloged and taken away for safekeeping. Governor Rick Perry and First Lady Anita Perry are out of the country, traveling in Scandinavia. The mansion is unoccupied, a rare moment in its history. Only security cameras keep watch, their lenses scanning the grounds through the darkness. At approximately 4 a.m., those cameras capture something. A figure approaches the mansion from the street. Their movements are deliberate. They are carrying something, a bottle. They pause at the base of the front porch, beneath those 6 towering columns that have stood for over a century and a half. They light the wick, glass shatters, flame erupts. Within seconds, the front porch is engulfed. The fire races up the columns, fueled by old wood and fresh paint. It spreads to the interior, consuming the entry hall, climbing the famous staircase, reaching the second floor. Smoke pours from the windows. The heat is so intense that glass begins to crack and fall. A passerby sees the flames and calls 911 at 4:05 a.m. The Austin Fire Department responds within minutes. Over 100 firefighters converge on the scene, their trucks bathing the mansion in red light. Water cannons blast the flames. Firefighters in full gear storm the building, fighting to contain the blaze before it consumes the entire structure. For 2 hours, the battle rages. The roof collapses inward. The front windows blow out. Smoke turns the dawn sky black. Journalists arrive, cameras rolling, broadcasting live images of one of Texas' most beloved landmarks being destroyed in real time. The sight is devastating. Texans wake up to the news and weep. By 6 a.m., the fire is finally under control. Firefighters begin assessing the damage. The front of the mansion is a blackened ruin. The iconic columns are scorched and cracked. The roof is gone. The interior is gutted, exposed to the sky. Water from the fire hoses has caused additional damage, pooling in what remains of the rooms, soaking into the historic wood. But remarkably, miraculously, the core structure has survived. The elaborate ceiling cornices, hand-carved over 150 years ago, are still intact. The pine subflooring, though waterlogged, has held. The brick walls, built by Abner Cook from his own clay, have withstood the inferno. Governor Perry, reached by phone in Europe, is told the news. He will later say, "A few more minutes of burning, and all that history would have been lost." The cause of the fire is immediately clear. This was no accident. Arson investigators examine the scene and find evidence of an accelerant, gasoline. The surveillance footage is reviewed. The figure approaching with the bottle, the ignition, the flight into darkness. Someone deliberately tried to burn down the Texas governor's mansion. The question is, who? Within days, the investigation is in full swing. The Texas Department of Public Safety, the Austin Police Department, the FBI, all join forces. The surveillance footage, though grainy, provides crucial evidence. The figure is male, wearing dark clothing. The vehicle is identified as a white Jeep, spotted near the mansion in the hours before the attack. Investigators canvass the area. They interview residents who live near the mansion, workers from nearby buildings, anyone who might have seen something. Composite sketches of the suspect are created based on the surveillance footage and witness descriptions. The sketches are released to the public. Billboards go up across Texas. A reward is offered. Information leading to the arrest and conviction of the arsonist. Tips pour in. Hundreds of them. Each one is followed up, investigated, dismissed, or pursued. Patterns begin to emerge. Several tips mention a group of individuals with anarchist beliefs, people who had previously been linked to vandalism and minor arson attacks on government property. The group is based in Austin, loosely organized, motivated by anti-government ideology. In February 2011, nearly 3 years after the fire, the Texas Department of Public Safety announces that they have identified persons of interest. The announcement is careful, legally precise. They are not suspects. They are not being charged, but investigators believe these individuals have information about the attack. Some of them have ties to anarchist groups. Some were in Austin on the night of the fire. Some had previously made threatening statements about government buildings. The timing of the attack is significant. June 2008. The Republican National Convention was only months away. Rick Perry, a Republican governor, was a potential target for politically motivated violence. The anarchist theory gained traction. Perhaps this was an act of protest. Perhaps it was meant to send a message. But despite the surveillance footage, despite the composite sketches, despite the persons of interest, despite 3 years of investigation, no arrests are made. No one is charged. The case grows cold. Linda would turn off the light each night before bed. It seemed wasteful to leave it burning. But each morning, without fail, the light was on again. She assumed her husband was turning it on. He assumed she wanted it on. But after several days, they compared notes. Neither of them was touching the light. Today, 17 years later, the arson of the Texas governor's mansion remains unsolved. It is considered one of the greatest unsolved crimes in Texas history. The surveillance footage still exists. The composite sketches are still on file. The persons of interest have never been cleared, but never charged. Investigators, when asked, admit they don't know if anyone will ever be held accountable. Theories abound. Some believe it was indeed politically motivated anarchists. Others suggest a personal grudge against Governor Perry. Some whisper about insurance fraud, though the mansion is owned by the state and there would be no financial motive. Conspiracy theorists propose cover-ups and hidden agendas. But the truth is simpler and more frustrating. Sometimes crimes go unsolved. Sometimes the guilty walk free. Sometimes history's questions remain unanswered. The fire, devastating as it was, also revealed something important. The mansion could have been lost forever that night, but it survived, and the people of Texas, looking at the blackened ruin of one of their most cherished landmarks, made a decision. They would rebuild. In the days following the fire, the mood in Texas was one of shock and grief. The mansion had been a constant, a touchstone, a symbol of continuity. To see it damaged felt personal, like an attack on the state's identity itself. But grief quickly gave way to determination. The Texas legislature authorized funds for restoration. The project would cost $25 million, $21.5 million in public funds, supplemented by $3.5 million in private donations. It was an enormous sum, especially during a period when the state was making budget cuts to education and healthcare. Critics questioned the priority. Was it right to spend so much on a building when classrooms needed supplies and hospitals needed staff? Supporters argued that the mansion was more than just a building. It was a living piece of Texas history, a national historic landmark, one of the oldest governor's residences in America. To lose it would be to lose an irreplaceable connection to the past. The debate was fierce, but ultimately the restoration moved forward. A team of preservationists, architects, and historians was assembled. Their mandate was clear: restore the mansion to its former glory, but also modernize it for the 21st century. Every detail had to be historically accurate. Every material had to match the original. At the same time, the house needed to meet modern building codes, accessibility standards, and safety regulations. The work was meticulous. Damaged wood was carefully removed and replaced with matching timber. The scorched columns were stripped down, repaired, and repainted. The roof was rebuilt using the original plans. Every window, every door, every piece of trim was replicated with obsessive attention to detail. But the restoration also incorporated modern improvements. 53 geothermal wells were drilled 300 feet into the earth, creating a sustainable heating and cooling system that took advantage of the Earth's constant temperature. Solar panels were installed on the roof to generate hot water. These systems were invisible from the outside, hidden within the historic structure. 1,500 square feet of interior space was added to make the mansion compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. An elevator was installed, the private quarters upstairs were expanded and modernized, a new scullery was added to the kitchen, and critically, a comprehensive fire suppression system was integrated throughout the entire house. Security was enhanced as well. Colorado Street, which ran along the east side of the mansion, was permanently closed to vehicle traffic. The entrance was redesigned to be more secure while remaining welcoming to visitors. For 4 years, the work continued. Craftsmen labored to match the skills of workers from 1856. Historians pored over photographs and documents to ensure accuracy. Slowly, painstakingly, the mansion came back to life. Governor Perry, visiting the site during construction, described the experience as surreal. The house looked like a skeleton, he said, stripped down to its bones. But the bones were strong. Abner Cook had built something that could withstand fire, time, and violence. On July 18, 2012, 4 years after the fire, Governor Perry stood on the restored front porch and faced a crowd of journalists, preservationists, firefighters, and citizens. The mansion gleamed behind him, its white columns brilliant in the Texas sun. Every detail was perfect. The house looked exactly as it had before the fire, and yet somehow better, stronger, renewed. Perry smiled, clearly emotional, and said the words he'd been waiting 4 years to say, "Welcome to the Texas governor's mansion." The restoration was complete, but the story, of course, was not over. The renovated mansion opened its doors to tours again, and almost immediately, the stories began. Staff members reported strange occurrences in the newly restored rooms, lights turning on and off, doors opening when no one was near them, the sound of footsteps in empty hallways, objects moving from where they'd been placed. Some wondered if the restoration had disturbed the spirits, if tearing down walls and rebuilding rooms had unsettled whatever energies had made the mansion their home. Others believed the ghosts had simply returned along with the furniture and paintings, reclaiming their territory. Visitors on tours mentioned seeing figures that didn't belong, a man in 19th century clothing standing near a window, gone when they turned to look again, a woman in a long dress descending the staircase, vanishing halfway down. Guides, reluctant to be dismissed as fanciful, nevertheless admitted that yes, there were rooms where they felt uncomfortable. Yes, there were times when the mansion felt occupied by more than just the living. The portrait of Sam Houston was rehung in its traditional place. The light above it was replaced, rewired, checked thoroughly by electricians. And according to at least one member of the Perry family, the phenomenon continued. The light would be off at night. It would be on in the morning. No explanation, no malfunction. Just Sam Houston, apparently, still keeping watch. The southeast bedroom with the mahogany bed was restored to perfection. But guests who have stayed in that room continue to report the sensation of being watched. Some refused to sleep there a second night. The north guest room, where the governor's nephew died, was also fully restored. The blood is long gone, the floorboards replaced during one renovation or another over the decades, but staff still avoid lingering in that room. There is a heaviness there, they say, a sadness that no amount of fresh paint can cover. And on the grounds, in the late evening when the last tour has ended and the mansion settles into silence, security cameras occasionally capture something odd. 2 figures walking hand in hand through the gardens. When guards go to investigate, they find nothing, just the wind through the live oaks, just shadows and memory. The mansion today is both a museum and a home. Governor Greg Abbott and First Lady Cecilia Abbott are its current residents, joining a chain of occupancy that stretches back to 1856. Tours are offered to the public, allowing visitors to walk through rooms where history was made, and some believe where history still lingers. The mansion is beautiful. It is grand. It is a masterpiece of Greek Revival architecture and a testament to the skill of Abner Cook and the determination of the people of Texas. But it is also something else. It is a repository of stories, some recorded in history books, others whispered in the dark. The ghosts, if they exist, are not malevolent. They are not demons or monsters. They are remnants of lives lived with passion, with love, with desperation, with principle. The young scout and the Comanche girl, who loved across boundaries that their world could not accept. The nephew, who felt too much and could not survive his own heart. The maid, dismissed and forgotten, still waiting for acknowledgement. Sam Houston, proud even in death, refusing to let his portrait go dark. Governor Murrah, wandering in search of something he lost long ago. These are the ghosts of the Texas governor's mansion. And perhaps they remain because the mansion itself remembers. Because a house that has witnessed 171 years of human drama, joy and sorrow, birth and death, power and powerlessness, cannot simply be a collection of bricks and wood. It becomes something more. It becomes a place where the past is never quite past, where the dead do not entirely leave, where history breathes. The arson of 2008 was an attempt to erase that history, to burn it down and scatter the ashes. But the house survived, the stories survived, and the ghosts, whatever they are, survived too. Today, if you visit the mansion on a public tour, your guide will likely tell you the official history. They will describe the architecture, the governors, the historic furniture. They may mention the fire and the restoration. If you ask about ghosts, they will smile politely and say, well, there are stories. But if you go there at dusk, when the tours have ended and the mansion is quiet, stand on the grounds and watch the windows. Listen to the sounds that carry on the Texas wind. You might see something, or someone, moving behind the glass. You might hear footsteps where no one walks. You might feel, just for a moment, that you are not alone. Because in the Texas governor's mansion, the past has never left. It lives in the nail holes in the banister, in the light that will not stay off, in the room that staff still avoid, in the two figures who walk hand in hand through gardens they have haunted for more than a century. The mansion holds its dead close, unwilling to let them go, and they in turn refuse to leave. Power passes from one governor to the next. Names change, policies shift, but the mansion endures. And so do its ghosts. In America's most haunted seat of power, the dead have learned to wait. They have time, all the time in the world. The mansion still stands on its hill in Austin, white columns gleaming, its windows dark at night, its secrets held close. 171 years of history, of tragedy, of love, of loss. And perhaps, if the stories are true, those who once called it home have never truly left. They remain, watching, waiting, walking the halls of a house that has become their eternity. In death, as in life, they refuse to surrender power. The Texas governor's mansion belongs to them now. It always has. But despite the surveillance footage, despite the composite sketches, despite the persons of interest, despite 3 years of investigation, no arrests are made. No one is charged. The case grows cold. Linda would turn off the light each night before bed. It seemed wasteful to leave it burning. But each morning, without fail, the light was on again. She assumed her husband was turning it on. He assumed she wanted it on. But after several days, they compared notes. Neither of them was touching the light.